we had completed, in fact, the first model of democracy, representative model of democracy. And what we had to discuss regarding that was the criticism of, or the issues and challenges of representative model of democracy. Correct. So basically, when we talk about the challenges of representative model of democracy, the first point that comes to our mind, it's not a representation in the true sense of the term. Means it is basically the challenge that we face in the representative model of democracy, and we call it challenges of misplaced trust. Misplaced trust means you are selecting a representative, you are electing an MLA or MP, but the trust which you repose, the trust which the people repose in MP, in a member of parliament or in the member of legislative assembly, that trust always gets betrayed. So what happens in representative model of democracy is primarily the fact that when you elect your representative, and when you elect your representative, what ultimately you find is that you feel that they will be working for you, right? And they will be working for the fulfillment of the interests of the people. But what happens in practice actually is that they do not work according to the wishes of the people. So this is basically a challenge of misplaced trust. All right. So they do not truly act as representative of the people. They're supposed to act, but so it is a problem of misplaced trust. This is the first one. All right. The second challenge that we find in representative model of democracy, that challenge of elected autocracy, we have already discussed these points, and I'm not going to elaborate here. So the challenge or the problems of elected autocracy. All right. So when you elect a representative, they form the government, and once the government is formed, so see, the power gets confined in the hands of the few leaders, what you call and you call them the elite. All right. So basically, representative government or democracy, elected democracy gets converted into an elected autocracy. So that is another challenge that we are facing. Right. Second is what happens is that, particularly in representative democracy, which is based on a majority rule. Majority rule means what? The person who gets maximum number of votes, he gets elected. So what would happen is that some candidates could get elected just on the margin of 200 votes, 100 votes, 10 votes, 5 votes, and so on. And there has been a history when a candidate has got there has been a history. What we have seen that the many candidates, they get elected by a minimum number of votes, say 1 vote, 2 vote, 10 votes, 100 votes, and so on and so forth. So what is the problem here? The problem here is that this means the large number of voters, they remain unrepresented. You try to understand the point. This means primarily there is a problem of minorities gets unrepresented. Suppose the candidate who has won the election, he has won the margin of, say, he has got a vote of, say, 1,50,000 vote he has got. And the candidate who has lost, he has got 1,49,000 votes. This means 1,000 vote was the margin. So what happens in majority rule system is the candidate who has got the maximum number of seats, he would get elected. So the problem in elected model of in representative model of democracy, which works on the majority rule, the problem would be that, and in most of the countries what we find, it works on the FPTP basis, first past the post system. Candidate getting maximum number of votes gets elected. This means a large number of people who have not voted for that candidate, they remain unrepresented. So basically, minorities' opinion get crushed under the weight of a majority votes. So minority gets neglected. That could be another challenge that we are facing in representative model of democracy. So basically, we can say it could be tyranny of the majority. You know why I'm saying tyranny of the majority? Means suppose a government that some party or any political party that has formed the government, they have formed government based on 2/3 or 3/4 majority. The current government, the Narendra Modi, have a comfortable majority, more than 2/3 majority they have in party. Now, when you have formed government with a more than 2/3 majority, that makes that leads to a tyrannical, that leads to a tyranny of the majority. When government has got a comfortable majority, when government has got a two-third majority, and so on and so forth, so there are chances of that representative government turning into a tyranny of the majority. That is also a challenge that we are facing in representative model of democracy. Again, there is no accountability. The people who have voted, the people who have voted for a particular political party and they have formed the government, but there is no accountability. There is no accountability means what they are going to do for next 5 years, you have got no control over them. So lack of government's accountability, lack of system of accountability towards the people, that is the point. And it's not only the accountability to the people, it is also the question of government's accountability to the legislature. To what extent government is accountable to the legislature, that there is a question mark on that also. When I'm talking about the government's accountability, I'm talking about the accountability of executive to the legislature. As what happens in parliamentary democracy, that executive is supposed to remain in power only so long as they have the confidence of the parliament, only so long as they have a confidence of the legislature. But what happens is that there is also a challenge pertaining to executive responsibility or executive accountability to the legislature, particularly when the government has been formed with more than two-thirds majority or a comfortable majority. All right. Rousseau, while talking about democracy and particularly talking about democracy in England, what Rousseau had said, he said that what happens in representative model of democracy and why we have that kind of model in, why we have accepted that kind of model in Western countries, is that because Englishmen, they are free only once in a 5 years. All right. It looks like that Englishmen, they are free once in 5 years. So once in 5 years, they would be participating in the election. And after that, after the government gets elected, they just not bother. They just don't bother. All right. So lack of a system of accountability. And if I can tell you, number of scholars, number of politicians, particularly if you talk about India, number of politicians from India, if you talk about Jayaprakash Narayan, if you talk about Mahatma Gandhi, if you talk about M.N. Roy, Marvindranath Roy, M.N. Roy, all the Gandhi and M.N. Roy will be sitting as a part of the Indian political thought. So all these leaders, including Jayaprakash Narayan, Mahatma Gandhi, and M.N. Roy, they have always been very critical of the representative model of democracy. And what they have supported a partyless democracy. Because what happens, the political leaders, they bother more about the political party rather than bothering about the people. All right. So Mahatma Gandhi, Jayaprakash Narayan, and M.N. Roy, they have talked about a concept of partyless democracy. Means people should be the people should be fighting in the election. All right. People should be electing the leaders, but those leaders who participate in the election, they should not belong to any political party. All candidates should be independent. All right. So a concept of partyless democracy, that what these leaders have been talking about. All right. So when we look into the working of representative model of democracy, we find several problems. Right. Now, one more important point before we switch to another important model is, in a representative model of democracy, we also need to find out what are the different categories of electoral system that we have. Because in representative model of democracy, the system of election becomes very significant. So I'll be again very, very brief here. Normally in the world, we find two kinds of representation system, two kinds of electoral system rather. One is what we call the majoritarian system, about which we have been talking about just now. And another is the proportional system. So majoritarian representation system, electoral system, and proportional representation or electoral system. Right. What happens in majoritarian representation system? There is a single member constituency. Single member constituency means from every constituency, one candidate is going to be elected. entire country would be divided into several constituencies, and from each constituency, one candidate would be getting elected. All right. So what has happened in fact is that, as I have told you, the candidate who gets maximum number of votes, he gets elected. Maybe the margin of election, margin of victory may be very less, maybe 1 vote, 2 vote, or 5 vote. The candidate winning maximum number of votes gets elected. That is the system. So this is a majoritarian electoral system that we have. Under majoritarian election system, we have usually a different kind of system. First system is, I have told you, is the plurality system. And why we call it a plurality system? What we are discussing? We are discussing different kind of representation system. First, I have told you about the majoritarian system, which is also known as the one category of majoritarian system, the plurality system. You see? What happens is that each voter is allowed to vote. All right. So everybody is voting. So there is plurality there. Everybody has a right to vote. All right. But everybody would be voting only for one candidate. All right. And candidate winning maximum number of votes will get elected. All right. Now in India, election for Lok Sabha and Legislative Assembly, the House of People and Legislative Assembly, for Lok Sabha as well as for the Legislative Assembly, elections are conducted based on this plurality system. All right. So plurality system is list representative. Now, why it is a list representative? It is list representative because of the fact that a good number of votes gets wasted. You know why? Because suppose the candidate who has won, he has got 1,50,000 votes. All right. And the candidate who has lost, who is the second one, he has got 1,49,000 votes. All right. The candidate who is the third one, he has got another 59,000 votes. The fourth one, another 40,000 votes. So what I'm trying to tell you is that bulk of the votes gets wasted since they do not find any representation under the system. So that is the problem with the plurality system. The second category of system, under the majoritarian electoral system, what we have it is known as the second ballot system. And example I would like to give here of the second ballot system, example I would like to give of France. What happens in France? The winning candidate, with the winning candidate requires absolute majority. It means 50% plus 1 vote. You try to understand the point. What happens in the second ballot system? That the candidate only that candidate can win. Only that candidate can be declared a winner who has secured minimum 50% vote, okay, plus 1. That is the absolute majority. All right. Now, try to understand the point. What happens? Suppose in the election that is held, all right. So none of the candidates, they have been able to secure 50% votes. All right. So what would happen then? The fresh election will be held that is why it is known as the second ballot. And in the fresh election that is held, only top 2 candidates would be retained. Try to understand the point. In the next election that is held, known as the second ballot, only top 2 candidates would be retained. When only 2 candidates are retained, then obviously one candidate in the next vote will obviously be getting 50%, more than 50%. So that is a very expensive system because you have to conduct the election again. All right. So in the second ballot system, this is working in France. So what happens is that the candidate who has got less than 50%, if no candidate has got more than 50% votes, this means nobody would get elected, and again the election would be held. And in the next election, only top 2 candidates, A and B, would only be retained, and rest of the candidates would be removed from the election. All right. And obviously, then only 2 candidates are there, then one candidate is likely to get more than 50%. So this is the system that we have, and we call the system system of second ballot, and it works in France. All right. Now, So when the elections are conducted second time, you get a majority-based candidate, but the point is that lot of money, lot of energy, lot of time gets wasted in the election. Right? Of course, it is an improvement over the plurality system, the earlier system that we have talked about. It is slightly an improvement from that because the candidate at least has a support of more than 50% of the voters. Right. So there is an improvement from the previous one, but again, it's an expensive system. The third system, when we talk of the plurality-based representation system, the third system, first we talked about the majority-based system, the plurality-based system, then we talked about the alternate vote system. Then we talked about the second ballot, and now we are talking about the alternate vote system. And this system works in one example I could give, though it works in other countries as well, but that works primarily in Australia. So Australia is the one example. Now, so what happens is that in Australia, in the alternative vote system, so instead of holding the election again, the situation which we find in France, that again the election would be held. So instead of holding the election for the second time, what has been a mechanism has been worked out under the alternate vote system that in the first round, if no candidate gets absolute majority, but here again the absolute majority is again required. But if the no candidate gets absolute majority in the first round, then candidates getting least number of votes would automatically get eliminated. Candidates who have got least number of votes would be eliminated. All right. Now, basically what happens is that the candidates, they have to write the preferences. This is preference 1, 2, the first preference, second preference, third preference, and fourth preference, depending on the number of candidates participating. So what happens? The candidate who has got the least number of votes, he would be getting eliminated. Now, again, the counting would be done based on second and the first round of preferences. Suppose in the first round, nobody got absolute majority. So again, so maybe now the first preference and second preference vote would also be candidate A. Now he has got 500 first preference votes and he has got 200 second preference votes. So now what would happen? The second preference vote would be counted. And in this way, finally, depending on the number of seats, what we find, depending on that, the moment the candidate gets absolute majority, all right, in the different based on the number of preferences, first, second, or third preferences, then the candidates get elected. So that is the alternative vote system which works in Australia. Though when we are talking about theory of democracy, it is not required to discuss all this, but just I'm trying to make the thing slightly elaborate, so that by any chance, if you get a question on different models of representation, so you can ask. But usually they will not ask because this is a theory of democracy and model of democracy. All right. Then the second kind of system what we have. So we have 3 systems under the plurality-based representation system. Second system which I had discussed was the proportional representation system. Now, in proportional representation system, what we have is there will be multi-member constituency. You try to understand the point. The significance of proportional representation system comes into vogue only when you have the multi-member constituency. Now, multi-member constituency means maybe from one constituency there will be 3 representatives. You try to understand the point. In multi-member constituency, there could be more than one candidate, and what will happen is that a quota is decided. A quota is decided means total number of votes divided by the total number of seats. How many seats are there? Plus 1. So total number of votes divided by total number of seats plus 1, and at the end would do plus 1. This is how we are finding out the quota. All right. So anybody who gets the quota, suppose total number of votes is 10,000, total number of seats is 10. So 10,000 divided by 10 plus 1, and whatever is the outcome, you will add 1 more to it to get the quota. All right. Now, once you have got the quota, now the moment, suppose there are 4 candidates, there are 4 seats. All right. Now this means 4 candidates have to be elected. All right. Or 10 candidates have to get elected. What is going to happen in that case? In the first preference, in the second preference, in third, and so ultimately, once you reach the quota, all right, once you reach the quota, and the candidate gets elected. All right. So what happens is in the system is that the best part about this proportional representation system is that the minorities also find representation. It's not only that the candidates winning maximum number of votes he gets elected, but depending on the number of seats. So if you have opted for candidate B, if you have opted for candidate C, the chances are that the other candidates would also get elected. So this means what? This means that the proportional system of representation is that depending on the number of votes having been received by a country, all right, the kind of support which you receive from the voters, depending on that, you get the number of seats. All right. Now, suppose what happens, this will be, I will clarify it further after once we discuss the list system. There is one more system. No, one is one is the proportional representation system, and what we call the single transferable vote. Now, why we call it a single transferable vote means only one person has voted, but the thing is that since he has expressed his preferences for candidate A, B, C, and D, and depending on the quota received by the candidate gets elected. All right. Single transfer vote. He votes only for once. The candidate, the voter would be voting only for once. But the point is, it is votes gets transferred, means based on first preference, second preference, and third preference. All right. One more important category under this proportional representation system, we have the list system. This is very important. Now, list system, what happens is that in list system, entire country is considered as a one constituency. You try to understand the point. Entire country will be considered. So what happens in Lok Sabha election? What we have is that you have a number of constituencies. All right, you have a number of constituencies. What happens is that under the list system, entire country would be considered as a one constituency. This means total number of seats would be decided. That the total number of seats in the parliament or in the legislature would be, say, for example, 500, or say, for example, 400. So that is decided. All right. Now, but the entire country would be considered as a one constituency. All right. But the total number of seats is 400. Now, what happens in the list system? Right? What happens in the list system is that every political party is supposed to provide a list of candidates to the election commission. All right. So people would be voting not for an individual candidate, but people would be voting for a particular political party. So they suppose there are 6 political parties or 7 political parties or 10 political parties. So people would be voting for the political parties. And every political party will provide a list of candidates. All right, would provide, and there would be criteria, and based on that criteria, they would be providing a list of candidates. Suppose there are 400 seats, so every political party would provide a list of 400 candidates. Now, when the elections are held, an entire country is considered as a one constituency, so people are voting for different political parties. All right, this means political party A has got 50% votes. All right, political party B has got 40% votes. So depending on the percentage of votes received by a political party, that political party would be finding representation out of the list which they have already provided to the election commission. Out of that, depending on percentage of votes secured by them, they would be getting their candidates selected. Means they have already provided the list in advance. All right. So the total number of seats are 400. So the political parties who have provided the list of 400 candidates, party A also, party B also, C also. depending on the percentage of votes they have got, so that percentage of candidates from one particular party would get elected. All right. So this is how the system works, and we call it a list system. So the people that do not vote for a candidate, they vote for a political party, and that is why it is called list system, because every political party is supposed to provide a list in it. There would be certain criteria when they provide a list, because maybe there would be a criteria that minimum number of women representatives should be 10%, minimum number of SC/ST representatives should be 40%. So there could be different criteria by different countries. They could have different criteria. All right. But the thing is, you have to provide the list. So that is what is known as the list system. All right. So these are the two basic categories of electoral system. What we call is the majoritarian system, the first one, and the second one, what we have called is the proportional system. Okay. So in proportional system, we talked about the quota system based on the single transferable vote, and then we talked about the list. If you have any question about this in mind, you can ask. If you have any question, if there is any doubt about the list system or any other system, you can just ask me. All right. The second model of democracy, participatory model of democracy. In participatory model of democracy, see, it is very difficult to have a separate model as a participatory model, because the real democracy is the one. Say in representative model of democracy, also there is a participation of people. People, they participate in the election. So without people's participation, you cannot have a representative model of democracy. But participatory model of democracy is being studied as a separate model to give more emphasis on the participation of the people. Right. Now, why there is a need for the participatory model of democracy? There is a need for participatory model of democracy because in representative model of democracy, people used to become virtually inactive in the next election. You try to understand why there is a need for a participatory model of democracy, because the people, the voters, they usually become inactive, in the next election. So 5 years, once they have elected the candidate, for 5 years they would be sitting idle. There is absolutely no way people could be participating. All right. So in order to resolve the issue of people's inactiveness, so we thought of developing a model what is known as the participatory model of democracy. Correct. And particularly, the second reason why there is a need for participatory model of democracy. In large democracies like India, because India is world's largest democracy. So in large democracy like India, only small group of people, they are getting involved in the decision-making process. So in order to ensure that people, masses, they also have some share in the decision-making process. Because in representative model of democracy, people are in no way involved in the decision-making process. All right. And only a handful of leaders, they are involved in the decision-making process. So in order to find out an alternative to that, so it was thought that there should be a separate model of democracy which gives more emphasis on, which leads to more involvement of people in the decision-making process. All right. The third reason why there is, it was thought that we should have another model of democracy, that is a participatory model, which gave more emphasis on participation, is that in practice, if you look into the practice of representative model of democracy, what you find, very, very few people, they are able to maintain a contact with the representative. So how many voters you have elected a member of parliament, or you have elected a member of state legislature? Now, frankly speaking, what percentage of electors or what percentage of voters have got any kind of connection, have got any kind of contact with the people, with the representatives whom they have elected, or whether they have met the candidate even for once? There is no way that voters could be getting in touch, remaining in touch with the representatives. There is no way. There is no mechanism. All right. So people, they do not have a contact with the representatives. So keeping that thing in mind, it was thought that if we have a model of democracy which gives more emphasis on people's involvement, people's participation, people's interaction with the representatives, so that would be fine. All right. So basically, what we find is that why the participatory model of democracy emerged. The participatory model of democracy emerged because of erosion of democracy. Erosion of democracy means because actually erosion of democracy or distortion of the representative model of democracy. All right. And if you look into either the elitist theory of democracy or if you look into in the pluralist theory of democracy, all right, people's involvement in both the models, the elitist model and the pluralist model, people's involvement is very, very negligible. All right. So in order to get the people involved somehow in the decision-making process, in order to get the people somehow involved in the decision-making process, it was thought that let us have a separate model of democracy, and that is known as the participatory model of democracy. All right. Now, when we talk about the participatory model of democracy, what we find is that this model is basically based on direct participation of the citizens in the process of formulation of decisions or implementation of decisions. All right. So when you say participatory model, it means it is based on the avenues that is available to the people for direct participation of the citizens in the process of either the policy formulation or the policy execution. All right. Now the question that crops up, that why do we need a separate participatory model when every democracy has some kind of provision for some kind of people's participation? The answer to this question is that none of the model of democracy, and none of the democracies in different parts of the world that we have experienced, they have any provision for real participation of the people. The people's participation is just confined to voting, that's all. All right. So a participatory model of democracy would require that the people should get themselves involved in one way or the other in the decision-making process. All right. Now, here I would like to refer the name of Macpherson. Macpherson we have already studied yesterday, and he had given a radical theory of democracy. All right. Macpherson says the two people, Macpherson and Patman, P-A-T-M-N, all right, they wrote a book, Participation and Democratic Theory. Macpherson and Patman, P-A-T-M-N. Macpherson and Patman, they together wrote a book, and the title of the book is Participation and Democratic Theory. Okay. What they have said is that the so-called representative model of democracy, there is very low degree of people's participation in the political process. All right. So that is why there is a need for a model. So even Macpherson and Patman, they are in favor of a separate model of democracy based on people's participation. Right. Another scholar, another political theorist who talked about the participatory model of democracy, you should be remembering the name of the people who are in favor of participatory model of democracy. Rousseau. According to Rousseau, Rousseau says that after Athenian model of democracy, the model that was revealed in Athens in this Greek city-state, after Athenian model of democracy, it was only Rousseau for the first time. So first, there was an Athenian model of democracy in which we thought about that the people were directly involved in the decision-making process. The reason being The number of citizens was very small. All right, everybody did not have a right to vote. The masses, the slaves, they did not have any right. All right, women, they did not have any right. So since there were very limited number of propertied class who, so it was possible for them to directly participate in the decision-making process. All right, but after Greek model, after the Athenian model of democracy, it was Rousseau who revived the people's model of democracy, or the people's participatory model of democracy. All right. Why Rousseau revived this model? Because for Rousseau, the main challenge was protecting the people's liberty. And he says that if there is no involvement of people in the decision-making process, if there is no involvement of people in the policy making, then what is going to happen? That the state would become so powerful that people's freedom would be crushed. So in order to ensure that people's liberty, people's freedom do not get crushed by the state, what we require is people's participation in the decision-making process. All right. Rousseau was against the representative model of democracy. And he said, why? He says, who is sovereign? Rousseau says, people are the sovereign. And if people are the sovereign, then how can sovereign, because sovereignty is something which can never be represented. If people are sovereign, they have to be sovereign. Sovereignty is never represented. So if you consider people to be sovereign, if you see the preamble of the Indian Constitution says, we the people of India, means that even the Constitution of India reflects people's sovereignty. All right. What Rousseau says, that sovereignty always should remain with the people. Sovereignty should not be represented. So with the people, they are the sovereign. So they have to directly participate. When they elect a representative to work on that behalf, this means they have shared the sovereignty. They have divided the sovereignty, and sovereignty is something which can never be shared. So what is required? What is required? What is required is that people should be directly involved in the decision-making process, because the real sovereignty belongs to the people, and sovereignty can never be represented. All right. Now, Rousseau says the aim of the participatory model of democracy is to make people interested, is to develop people's interest in the political, economic, and the legal process. Because the only way to make the people responsible, the only way to make the people accountable is to involve them in the decision-making process. All right. So this would make the people politically, legally, and economically very conscious, because they will have to participate in the decision-making process. All right. So people will develop interest in the affairs of the state, in the economic affairs of the state, in the legal affairs of the state, in the political affairs of the state. So first reason why participatory model was needed, according to Rousseau, was to develop people's interest in the government and the governance process. All right. Second thing Rousseau says that if people they are involved in the decision-making process, they would consider state affairs, they would consider activities of the state as their own activity. So this would make them more responsible, and they would consider state. So this will lead to the growth of a feeling of nationalism among the people, because they would think that they are working for the country, they are working for the state. So this will make people think that a state affair, they would be considering the state affair or the affairs of the state as their own affair. All right. So people would become more responsible in the participatory model of democracy. So that is why Rousseau wants that participatory government should be there. All right. Another reason why Rousseau asked for participatory model of democracy, because this would lead to people's enlightenment. This would lead to people's enlightenment. Okay. So these are the reasons why participatory model has been preferred by Rousseau. All right. Now, other exponents of the participatory model of democracy, as I have already told you earlier, is Mahatma Gandhi, M.N. Roy, and Jayaprakash Nayak. So those who were the critics of the representative model of democracy. So obviously, they would become an exponent of the participatory model of democracy. All right. Now, one more Western scholars I would like to refer here when we discuss the participatory model of democracy. His name is Habermas, Habermas, Habermas. Now, Habermas has given a concept, and in context of the participatory model of democracy, he has given a concept of public sphere. He talks about a term, what is known as the public sphere. So you could be asked a question about Habermas's public sphere as a part of participatory model of democracy. Right. Public sphere means people, they come together for a discussion and debate on various issues, on various challenges faced by the country, faced by the state, and providing a solution. You try to understand this point. Habermas is using a term, public sphere. Public sphere means people, they come together. Any platform could be there. So people would be coming together. It could be a discussion in a seminar. It could be a discussion in a workshop. It could be a discussion in a club. It could be a discussion in a restaurant. So people would be coming together and they would be discussing the various problems and challenges, various issues faced by the people, and they would try to provide a solution. All right. So it could be a meeting, even like a meeting in a coffee club. It could be a meeting in a restaurant. So what happens is that this kind of activity, when people get actively involved in the affairs of the state by discussing the issues, by providing the solution, discussing the solution and providing the solution. All right. This is called public sphere. All right. There could be discussion in a tea shop. There could be discussion in a restaurant, in a coffee club, in a seminar, in a workshop, so on and so forth. So this would be called public sphere. Habermas says the real strength of democracy in Western countries comes from public sphere. What he's saying is that in Western countries, people are so alert, people are so conscious. All right. So what Habermas says, that it is not the parliament or it is not the Congress. It is neither in the parliament nor in the Congress, but rather it is in the coffee house or in the restaurant that people discuss different issues and challenges. They provide solution. They also discuss the solution. So what he's saying is that in Western countries, what has strengthened the democracy or what has made democracy deep-rooted in Western countries, according to Habermas, is this concept of public sphere, and he calls it a democratic culture. See, when people, they discuss the issue and they make their opinion felt through the media. They express their opinion through the media. They ventilate the grievances through the media. So what happens is that government takes into account, the legislators, they take into account the opinion of the people. So there is a democratic culture in the Western countries, according to Habermas. This may be partly true, but this is what is called public sphere. Even if what Habermas is trying to say, for example, the farmers' agitation in India, or few years back, the movement called India Against Corruption, led by Anna Hazare and Arvind Kejriwal, that which forced the government to pass the law, the Lokpal bill, the Lokpal law, which was passed by the government. All right. This means this could be an example of public sphere. The people that participate in the Candle March, they do demonstration against the government. So that could also be an example of the public sphere. So if you get a question on public sphere, you have to write about the Habermas. So this kind of discussion in public about the affairs of the state would lead to promotion of a democratic culture, and this is called public sphere. And this is a way of people's participation in the affairs of the state. So when we talk about participatory model of democracy, we could also refer to Habermas' views on public sphere. Now, the second one, after talking about Rousseau, after talking about Habermas, I'd be referring to Nancy Fraser. I'm referring to Nancy Fraser, Nancyfraser. Nancy Fraser, she is a lady. Nancy Fraser, another political scientist. Nancy Fraser, she says that what is needed, what do we need in participatory model of democracy, according to Nancy Fraser, is that the marginalized section of the society means people who are living on the margins, means downtrodden, people living on the margins, people who are living down the line. According to Nancy Fraser, people who are living down the line, or people who are living on the margin or the marginalized section of the society, should form their own public sphere. What Nancy Fraser is saying, that they should be forming their own public sphere, they should be forming their own group. All right. And she used a term for that, and she calls it counter public. The term which uses for this says is that the most serious challenge that we are facing in the country, in the states these days, is the challenge of neglect of, is the challenge in the form of neglect of the people who are living on the margins. So in order to ensure that the people who are living on the margins, they come up in the ladder, all right, and in order to ensure that their standard of living gets improved, all right, and they also get socioeconomic justice. So what Nancy Fraser is suggesting is that they should be forming their own public sphere, should be forming their own association, they would be discussing their own affairs, they would try to exert pressure on the political system, and she calls it counter public. So two terms I have used. One, I have used the public sphere by Habermas, and then I have used Nancy Fraser's concept of counter public. But counter public is used in context of the downtrodden or the marginalized section of the society. So when we discuss participatory model of democracy, apart from discussing the views of Rousseau, you also have to discuss Habermas, and you also have to discuss Nancy Fraser. All right. The next one is next philosopher or next political scientist that I'm going to mention here is Jacques Rancière, Jacques, Jacques Rancière, Rancière. Jacques Rancière. Jacques Rancière says, basically, he has redefined the term political. He has redefined, or he has recapitulated the term, he has reconceptualized, in fact. He has redefined, or he has reconceptualized the concept of political. It says political should include those people who have been living on the margin. So whether we talk about the Jacques Rancière or whether we talk about Nancy Fraser, they are of the same opinion. So Jacques Rancière has reconceptualized the term political. So political, he says, should include those people who are living on the margins. And according to Rancière, people's participation is the only way, is the only solution to end the domination and exploitation of people. What Rancière is saying, the most serious challenge that is faced by democracy these days is the domination and exploitation of the weaker sections of the society, domination and exploitation of the people who are living on the margin. All right. So haves, they are exploiting the have-nots. Okay. So what RamSai is suggesting is that the only way that we can, the only way to improve or only way to end the domination and exploitation of the people living on the margin is to get them involved in the participation, in the get them involved in the decision making process. Okay. That is what RamSai is saying. Then there is another scholar, Benjamin Barber, B-A-R-B-R, Benjamin Barber. Now, Benjamin Barber says that participatory democracy is necessary to resolve the issue of corruption. According to Benjamin Barber, the real challenge in representative model of democracy is a challenge of corruption. There is a challenge of political corruption, there is a challenge of bureaucratic corruption. This is the real challenge that you find in representative model of democracy. And the only way this could be resolved is through participatory model of democracy or by getting people involved in the decision-making process. All right. Now, I would like to refer here the views of Amartya Sen also. Amartya Sen we have already studied. So what Amartya Sen is saying, the two requirements for participatory model of democracy. To make the democracy more participative, Amartya says there are two basic requirements. One requirement is capacity building. You know, that enhancing the capability of the people. So Amartya Sen, when we are discussing theory of equality, Amartya Sen talked about equality of capability. So what Amartya Sen is saying that if you want democracy to be participative, what is required is enhancing the capability of. So if the people's capability and people's capacity gets enhanced, so they will obviously be in a situation to participate. So first requirement is enhancing the capability of the people or the capacity building of the people. The second requirement to make the system more participative is to create a conducive environment. What Amartya Sen is saying is that you have to create a conducive environment. And he says that India, we have tried to create the conducive environment by bringing about 73rd constitutional amendment. But 73rd constitutional amendment, which has led to formation of a local self-government in the country, that has not been very effective. Right? Because it should have led to grassroots involvement. What it should have actually led to the grassroots level of democracy. More details about grassroots level of democracy we will discuss when we discuss the local self-government as a part of Indian government and politics at a later stage. But what Amartya Sen is saying is that 73rd Constitutional Amendment did not go a long way in enhancing the capability of the people. See, what is the purpose of creating a local self-government? The purpose of creating a local self-government to 73rd Amendment, what was the purpose? The purpose was to get the people involved. At the village level, get the people involved. At the panchayat level, get the people involved in the decision-making process. But that did not happen. There are several reasons for that, and I'm not going to go into details right now. All right. So there have been several reasons. But basically, despite you have provided reservation for the SC, ST, and women, you know, in the local in the local self-government, but that has not worked. It has not led to actual people's participation in the actual sense. All right. Why? We'll discuss it later on. So Amartya Sen is saying is that the best thing is to enhance people's capacity and create a conducive environment, but that did not happen through the 73rd Constitutional Amendment. All right. Now, let us come to the most crucial point of now. You may have a question in your mind that what are the modes of participation? What are the conventional modes of participation, and what could be more avenues, or what could be the new avenues of people's participation in the democracy? All right. Let us first try to understand what has been the conventional mode of people's participation in democratic process. The first is conventional mode is voting. People they participate in the election. Second mode is second example is that you are free to contest in the election. All right. So people could be contesting for the public offices. You could be contesting to become a member of Lok Sabha. You could be contesting. You have a freedom to participate in the election. Okay. You could be contesting for a member of parliament. You could be contesting for member of the state legislature. You could be contesting for a local self-government. So the first mechanism, conventional mode of participation, is voting. Second, I have told you, is you can be contesting for the public offices. Okay. Third is you could be campaigning for a political parties. Maybe you belong to party A or party B, so you could be campaigning on behalf of the political party. All right. So that is the third way. That is the third way how we could participate in the political process. But these are the conventional modes of people's participation. Voting is the one. Contesting for public offices is the second, and campaigning in favor of a political party is the third. All right. The fourth one is you could participate in the community projects. Community projects, for example, there is cleanliness drive, there is Swachhata Abhiyan. All right. There is a public safety mechanism, there is a public safety platform. So you could be contributing towards different community developmental projects. All right. So maintenance of public park. So whatever community projects are there, you could be participating in that. So that is also a way. So these are the ways you are participating in that. You could be participating. You could find an avenue to participate in the public sphere. All right. The other method which is used is you could be signing a petition. You must have seen these days we are signing online petition also. So you could be signing a petition online and offline petition. People could sign and they could send the petition to the concerned department. All right. Or people could join the public march. They could participate in the protest movement and so on and so forth. All right. So, but these measures, these conventional modes of people's participation in the public sphere, public affairs, is in reality, they do not actually provide you the opportunity to participate in the decision-making process. All right. They are only a manifestation of your public interest. All right. They are only a manifestation of public interest, but in no way they are providing you, they are giving you an opportunity to actually participate in the decision-making process. All right. Now, what could be the real way? What could be the real way of people's political participation? Or what could be the real form of people's participation? All right. Now, first is citizen-centric contacts. Citizen-centric contacts means citizens could come together and they could directly contact the public officials. They could be contacting them, they could be meeting the MLAs, they could be meeting the MPs. So directly contacting the public officials, you can meet them personally. So the first mechanism of political participation, the real sense of the term, is known as citizen-initiated contact, citizen-centric contacts or citizen-initiated contacts. So initiative is taken by the public. People come together on a platform, they take the initiative, and they develop contact, they make contact. It could be a personal contact, it could be a contact through phone, it could be a contact through fax, email, it could be a letter to the. So basically, it is called citizen-initiated contacts. Means you are directly trying to come in touch with the public official. Correct. Second one is called initiative. First, I said citizen initiative contact. What we are discussing? We are discussing different forms of people's participation in the participatory model of democracy. The second one is initiative. Now, initiative, what happens in initiative? You are collecting a specified number of signatures. Okay? You are raising an issue. You have highlighted an issue. You have your grievances, and you want the action of the government on that. So what we do? You collect a specified number of signatures, and you want it to be submitted to the legislature in initiative. The second mechanism is called initiative. So what we do in initiative is that on any issue, specified number of signatures of the citizens or the public, they are getting collected, and they are in a form of memorandum. They are submitted to the concerned state or central legislature through their representative. All right. This is called initiative. The third one, we call it recall. The third system is called recall. All right. Now, recall, we do not have it in India, but the recall could be very effective mechanism. Recall means the process through which public officials can be recalled. Why they can be recalled? This means they can be removed from the offices. Recalled, basically, they can be removed from the offices. So the process through which recall is a process through which public officials can be recalled. Why you are recalling them? Because of their failure to take action in the public interest. Because of failure of the people's representative or the official to take action in favor of the public, or because of the fact there is a negligence of duty. There is a negligence of duty on part of the public official, or there is a case of unfulfilled responsibility or unfulfilled obligation. In that case, that representative, that official could be recalled. So there should be a provision. There should be a provision. So under this provision, public officials could be recalled. So a good number of people, a majority of the people, they could come together. They could collect either the signatures or they could write a memorandum, and they can ask for recall. All right. So that is the third way of people's participation. First, I put city and initiated contact. Second, I said initiative, and third, I said recall. All right. The fourth one could be organizing a public hearing. Political parties, they could organize a public hearing, or what is known as a Mohalla Savad. So a political party or the leader in their constituency, they can call a public meeting, they can call a Savad, they can call a meeting, and they can ask people for their views. All right. So it could be called public hearing or Mohalla Savad. So this is a process under which public officials, they invite the members of the public to elicit their opinion, to elicit their opinion, to solicit their opinion. What is their say on a particular issue? What is their take on a particular issue? All right. So sometimes when they called a Mohalla Sabha meeting or when they organize a public hearing, so they can also seek the written opinion of they can also ask for written opinion of the people on the issue. All right. So that is also a way of people's participation. So we call it public hearing or Mohalla Sabha. All right. Another mechanism could be the setting of an advisory council. All right, setting up an advisory council. Government could set up an advisory council in which members of the public could be involved. So people could become a part of an advisory council, and they could give their advice to the public. Then we have a referendum, and then we have a plebiscite. Referendum, all of you understand? Referendum means the difference between referendum and plebiscite is that in referendum, the answer is to be given in yes or no. Whether Britain should withdraw from European Union or not, the people would be giving vote either in yes or in no for Brexit. Brexit, they want yes, or they do not want Brexit. So then you have the option to give your opinion in the form of yes and no. We call it referendum. So on various issues, referendum could be organized. So referendum is the best way of people's participation, or the plebiscite. Now in plebiscite, there could be more than two options. For example, though we have not conducted, there is supposed to be a plebiscite, the UN mandated plebiscite to decide the fate of Jammu and Kashmir, in which you have three different options: whether you want to remain independent, whether they want to be part of Pakistan, whether they want to be part of India. So when there are more than two options, and when the answer cannot be given in yes and no, so we conduct a plebiscite. So there is referendum and plebiscite is also a mechanism. They are also a mechanism for people's participation. All right. Again, in order to show your approval, in order to show people, the approval or disapproval of the government policy, in order to show the disapproval of the government policy, the people could launch a protest movement. So protest movement, in order to exert pressure on the state, in order to exert pressure on the government, so what the people can do, people can launch a protest movement like the farmers movement in order to influence the decision of the government, like in order to make their preferences known to the government. So you could be organizing a protest march. All right. So after referendum and plebiscite, another participatory mechanism is protest march. So protest march, strike, slogan shouting, uh, civil disobedience movement. So there could be many ways of participation in the in in influencing the governmental decision. So you could be asked a question that what are the avenues of people's participation? So I have given you a point for that. Now, how this participatory mechanism could be strengthened further? What more measures we could suggest in participatory model of democracy? All right. What more measures could be suggested in participatory model of democracy? In modern states, if we talk about the more measures, how it can be done. So one suggestive method that we can give is making the system more decentralized, making the governance process more decentralized. So decentralization of administration. Okay. Because many decisions could be left with the local units of administration. For example, though we have a local self-government, but it is not working very effectively. So in order to give people an opportunity to participate in the decision-making process at the grassroots level, what is the solution? Solution is that we could make the system more decentralized. So decentralized administration is one such suggestive measure that we can give. All right. The second mechanism that we can give is extensive use of referendum, though it is rarely used in India. So extensive use of referendum. Switzerland is the only country where there is the referendum mechanism is widely used. So extensive use of referendum could be the other measure that we could suggest. All right. Now, using technology. Another measure that we could suggest in participatory model of democracy to make the system more participatory is that we could encourage the use of technology. Use of technology, use of networking, creating a new participatory app. Let the state, let the government create a new app for getting the people, for eliciting people's opinion, for getting the people involved. So using technology more and more. Okay. Using social media. So using technology and social media and using the networking to to solicit or to elicit people's opinion. So to make the system more participatory, we can be using technology. All right. Then the citizens could form an issue-based group. Citizens could form issue-based groups. For example, if it is an issue pertaining to farmers, then farmers should be forming a group. If there is an issue pertaining to the workers, so workers should be forming a group. So if there is an issue pertaining to doctors, pertaining to medical professionals, so they should be forming a group. So by forming an issue-based group, all right, by forming an issue-based group and by the people could try to, could try to exert, try to exert pressure or try to influence the government policy by creating a issue-based group. All right. So these are the mechanism through which we can try to increase people's participation, and we can make the system more participative. Now, but the thing is that when we try to evaluate the participatory model of democracy, the only thing that we can say is that it is too optimistic a model. Participatory model of democracy is too optimistic a model. And because in a country like India, or any country where the population is so large, so huge, so participation of the people could be enhanced only to a limited extent. To try to understand the point. Participation of the people, I'm just evaluating now the participatory model of democracy, just trying to conclude that despite several mechanisms that we have suggested, both conventional and the non-conventional mode of people's participation. All right. So the chances of success of participatory model of democracy is not much, because this is too optimistic a model. Why? Because there is a very limited way you can enhance people's participation. And secondly, everybody may not have the insight. Everybody may not have the insight. Everybody may not have the knowledge. Everybody may not have the level of intelligence which is required to participate in the governance process or to participate in the decision-making process. So this is a limitation of this model, that you could enhance people's participation only to a limited extent, and everybody may not have a kind of insight, may not have a kind of level of intelligence which is required to participate in the decision-making process. Right. One more important point that we need to understand when we talk about the limitations of the participatory model of democracy. See, it is very difficult when ordinary people, I'm talking in terms of the masses. So when masses, they try to participate, when the people at large, they want to participate, basically it is a problem of crowd building. Right? It becomes very difficult to keep the crowd disciplined and to keep the crowd under control. So in any method through which people who try to directly participate, or people who try to influence, and people try to exert pressure on the government, so that could create a problem of indiscipline, that could create a problem of because the people would be getting converted into a crowd which will be very difficult to control. So this is another challenge that we find that we are faced with when we really want to give people an opportunity to participate in the decision-making process. All right. Secondly, lastly, what would happen is that if you give so much emphasis on the participatory model of democracy, now what is going to happen, giving so much emphasis on the participatory model of democracy, what would happen is that this could lead to frequent protest, this could lead to strike, this could lead to a lot of agitation, and so much of protest, so much of strike, so much of agitation would ultimately hamper the development process, right? Would hamper the development process and would create a challenge for the political stability of it. So these are the challenges that we face if we want to make the system more participatory. So these are the challenges that we face in the participatory model of democracy. Now, the last model of democracy that we will be talking about is deliberative model of democracy. Deliberative means a model of democracy where there are enough avenues, where there are enough opportunities for discussion, where the decisions are taking place after due deliberation on a different platform. When you take a decision after deliberation, for example, before coming out with a law, before coming out with a bill in the parliament, the concerned ministry or the concerned department releases the framework of the law, the framework of the proposed law in the public domain. Before they come out with the law, before they come out with the bill, what they would be doing is that they would be coming out with the framework of the bill in the public domain on their website, and they would ask people to give their opinion on that. So people's opinion would be solicited, all right, on the proposed bill. All right. So people would be giving their opinions. All right. And before the government comes out with the bill, they would be taking into consideration, the opinion of the people. So we could say that a deliberation has taken place. Again, to give you another important example, every bill, if it is discussed in parliament, and no bill is passed in a haste, because parliament is the main forum for deliberation. Parliament is main forum for deliberation. So opposition is also given an opportunity to raise the issue, all right, to highlight the issue, to give their opinion on the bill, all right, and their opinion is given a weightage by the government, by the party in power. And not only that, before coming out with the bill, what the government does is the government is sending the bill to a select committee or to a parliamentary committee. In parliamentary committee, there are representatives belonging to different political parties. And that committee would be going into the details of the bill, and they would be giving the recommendation. All right. So these are the methods we could make the system more deliberative. In fact, when we talk about a deliberative model of democracy, in fact, you cannot think of democracy without a proper mechanism for deliberation. So there should not, in fact, we have started talking about a participatory model or deliberative model only because the real democracy should have been an amalgamation of both representative, participatory, and deliberative model. All right, but it has not happened like that. So there are not much deliberation on the issues, and the parliament passes most of the bill in a haste. All right. So had there been a proper deliberation on the issue of 3 farm laws, and probably we would not have the farmers strike in this country. So when we talk about deliberation, what we mean by deliberation is dialogue, debate, and discussion. So before taking any decision, there should be a dialogue among the different stakeholders. There should be a debate on different forums, and there should be a debate and discussion. So dialogue, debate, and discussion, these are the methods. These are the methods of deliberation. Right. So, in fact, there should not have been any need to add the term modern deliberation to democracy, because democracy itself means deliberation. Democracy is not democracy in the real sense of the term if there is no discussion, if there is no deliberation. So, but what has happened is that in modern democracy, we have forgotten the essence of democracy. And what is the essence of democracy? The essence of democracy is deliberation. So democracy has virtually become a game of numbers. If you have a good majority in parliament, if you have a good majority in the state legislature, you are not bothered about deliberation. So within 5 minutes, we have seen in parliament, within 5 minutes, 5 bills or 4 bills or 3 bills are passed by the government. Why? Because you have a majority, and you pass the bill with a voice vote. All right. So in modern democracy, we have forgotten the essence of democracy. And what is that essence of democracy? That essence of democracy is deliberation and discussion. All right. And as I said, the modern democracy has become a game of numbers. So if you have a comfortable number, you are not bothered about deliberation. All right. What J.S. Mill says. J.S. Mill says, a beautiful statement given by J.S. Mill. J.S. Mill uses a term, he calls it tyranny of majority. He uses the term tyranny of majority, and he says that if all but one member has got a difference of opinion. Now try to understand the point, what J.S. Mill has said. He says, if all but one, suppose there are 540 members, and 540 members, and out of 540 members, 539 members, they are of one opinion. I'm trying to explain what J.S. Mill has said. What he's saying, if all but one has a difference of opinion, it would be incorrect. It would be unethical on part of majority to silence the single vote. You try to understand the point. What J.S. Mill is saying, that even if, to give an example, if out of 540 members, 539 members are in favor of something and one member is against that thing, even in that case, it will not be correct. It would not be correct on part of majority to silence even the single vote. Means everybody, even a single member is there and he is not in favor of the bill, but he should be given a choice. He should be given a chance to express his views. He should be given a chance to deliberate upon the issue. Which means you cannot silence even a single voice. That is what J.S. Mill has said about the deliberative model of democracy. All right. Rousseau said that it is only by deliberation that you would come to know about the general will. What a general will, as I have told you earlier, is sum total of the will of the society. General will is sum total of, it is a common will. Sum total of the total will of society, we call it a general will. So Rousseau says it is only by deliberation that you can come to know about the general will. That is what is needed. So like Aristotle had said, to quote Aristotle said, ordinary people deliberating on the issue can arrive at a better decision than the experts or the philosopher king. What Aristotle had said, ordinary people deliberating on an issue, because they are the one who are facing the problem. They are the one who are facing the challenges. They are the one who are living on the margin. So Aristotle says ordinary people deliberating on an issue can arrive at a better decision than the so-called experts or the philosopher king alone. This means no proper decision could be taken without getting the people involved, without giving people an opportunity to deliberate on the issue. Right. So what we can say about deliberative model of democracy, that this is nothing but a variant of the participatory democracy, because ultimately when you want deliberation of the people, when you are giving the people chance of deliberation, which means basically you are giving them an opportunity to participate. So that is what is called deliberative model of democracy. Correct. Why deliberation is needed? Because the people would be the one who would be investing time to deliberate on the pros and cons of the issue. They are the one, because they are the one who are facing the challenge. So they are the one. So before participating in the vote, before participating in the election, this is the significance of deliberative model of democracy, that people would be deliberating, the citizens would be deliberating on the various issues, and it is only after deliberation that they can be voting. So they could be voting for a particular candidate or a particular party only after deliberation, only after evaluating the performance of the candidate. All right. So this kind of deliberation among the people, okay, would provide a legitimacy to the government. You try to understand the point. What is said about the model of democracy is that when the citizens, they invest their time on deliberating on an issue, and accordingly when they vote. So this deliberative process gives law a legitimacy. All right, this gives the law, gives the system a legitimacy. All right. And if no consensus is reached after deliberation, try to understand the point. If no consensus is received, is achieved even after deliberation, then we can give them a chance for majority vote. Try to understand the point. First, there should be deliberation, and if deliberation fails, then, but even in the parliament, what happens? Let deliberation doesn't take place. All right. So if there is a deliberation and even after deliberation, the bill gets passed by majority, as usually happens, so nothing wrong in that. All right. So matter could be decided first, and first option should be to take the consensus of the people, to take the consensus of the representative, to bring about a consensus among the people. If it is not possible, then we can decide by the majority vote. So what we can say is that a deliberative model of democracy is basically an amalgamation of representative model of democracy and direct democracy, because we are giving people an opportunity to deliberate on the issue. So this deliberative model of democracy can be also described as an amalgamation of representative model of democracy and direct model of democracy. All right, that is the point. Now, let us look into some theoretical aspect of this participatory deliberative model of democracy. The term deliberative model of democracy was coined by Joseph M. Bassett, J-O-S-E-P-H. You will have to use these names. The term was coined by Joseph, J-O-S-E-P-H, M. Bassett, B-E-S-S-E-T-T-E. Joseph M. Bassett, B-E-S-S-E-T-T-E. Joseph M. Bassett. He wrote a book published in 1980, and the title of the book was Deliberative Democracy. All right. What Bassett is saying about the deliberative model of democracy, he says that democratic decisions, in order to be legitimate, what Bassett, Joseph M. Bassett says, that in his book Deliberative Democracy, published in 1980, he says deliberative decisions, in order to be legitimate, must be based on authentic deliberation. Bassett says, Joseph M. Bassett says that deliberative decisions, in order to be legitimate, must be based on automatic deliberation. All right. And it should be free from any kind of, distortion, and it should be free from any kind of distortions of unequal political power. What he's saying, I'll just repeat, democratic decisions, in order to be legitimate, must be based on authentic deliberation, and it should be free from any kind of distortion of unequal political power. No, what is the meaning of distortion on account of unequal political power? Distortion on account of unequal political power means if you are in majority, so you will try to silence the minority. So that is what is meant by distortions of unequal political power. So what Bassett is saying is that democratic decisions, in order to be legitimate, must be based on authentic deliberation, and it should be free from any kind of distortion of unequal political power. Now, the last aspect of discussion on this deliberative model of democracy, this is a Fiskin's model. All right. So Fiskin, F-I-S-S-K-I-N, Fiskin model of deliberation. He has talked about some essential characteristic of legitimate deliberation. Fiskin's model, F-I-S-S-K-I-N, Fiskin has talked about he has given a model of deliberation, and he says that there should be 5 things, 5 elements, 5 characteristics are essential, in order to make deliberation legitimate. So what are those 5 characteristics that Fiskin has talked about? Okay. Number 1, information access. Information access means people would be able to deliberate on the issue only when they have an access to the information on the issue. Suppose you want that people should be deliberating on a particular bill. So unless and until people have information about that bill, all right? Now you want that people should be, or members should be, members in parliament should be deliberating. Members in parliament should be deliberating on a Lokpal bill or on a financial bill. Unless and until there is an excess of information to them, so they would not be able to deliberate. So first important ingredient of a Fiskin model of deliberation is that access to information or information access. All right. Without access to information, you cannot deliberate. All right. The second one, the deliberation should be a substantive balance should be maintained between different perspectives. On one particular issue, there could be different perspectives, there could be different viewpoints. All right. On one particular issue, there could be point A, there could be point B, there could be point C. So there could be different opinions on one particular issue. What is needed in Fiskin's model? Fiskin is saying that there should be substantive balance. A balance should be maintained between different points of view or between different perspectives. So maintaining a balance between different perspectives, see the second important characteristic, second important element that is required to make the system truly deliberative. All right. So first is access to information. Second is maintaining substantive balance between different perspectives. Right. The third one is there should be respect for diversity. Those who are not agreeing, those who belong to different points of view. All right. So there should be respect for diversity. Diversity, or you can say the minorities' viewpoints should also be respected. So respect for diversity is the third element in the Fiskin's model of deliberation. So the fourth important thing in the deliberative model of democracy, is conscience. It should be based on consciousness of the people. The consciousness of people is what? The extent to which participants they are able to weigh the merits and demerits of the argument. This is very important. So on any particular issue, we call it consciousness of the people who are deliberating on the issue. So the consciousness means what? The extent to which the participants they seriously believe in discussing the merits of the argument. So you have your argument A, my argument is B, somebody else's argument is C, but we should all be prepared to listen to everybody's argument. We should give weightage to the merits of everybody's argument. So your argument will have some merit, my argument will have some merit, her argument will have some merit. So everybody's argument, the merit in everybody's argument should be given a proper weightage. All right. This is the fourth important point. And the last important point in the Fiskin's model of deliberation is equal consideration. So it looks like a repetition, but last point is equal consideration to different points of view. Equal consideration to different points of view. So basically, Fiskin has repeated the point because this point could be considered when you are saying the respect for diversity. So the fifth point that Fiskin is suggesting is equal consideration to different arguments or different points of view. So this is all about the deliberative model of democracy. So what kind of question could be asked from uh, what kind of questions could be asked from what you call is the topic of democracy. Uh, Try to understand. They can ask you the question on different theories of democracy. We have discussed the classical theory of democracy, then we have discussed the modern theory of democracy. But try to understand. If they ask you question on elitist theory of democracy, they will not ask you question on elitist theory of power. It is one and the same. If they ask you a question on pluralist model of democracy, they will not ask you question on pluralist model, pluralist theory of power. All right. So it is one and the same. So they can ask you question on elitist or pluralist theory of democracy, or they can ask you question on, as we have discussed, on Macpherson's theory of democracy. They can ask question on that. All right. Or the theory of radical democracy, which belongs to Macpherson. All right. So theories of democracy, they can ask you the question, or they can ask you a question on either of the model of democracy. Or they can ask you a question is that the real democracy is based on inclusion of representation, deliberation, all right, and participation. So they can ask you a combined question. The real democracy should be based on representation, participation, and deliberation. They can ask you a question on that, or they can ask you a separate question on either of the models. All right. I hope I have been able to make my point clear. Now, the new topic that I'm shifting to will be power. First, I will explain the concept of power. Usually they don't ask question on concept of power, but in order to understand the theory of, it is essential to understand the concept of power in political theory. So power as a political theory, concept of power as a political theory, that is what I'm going to explain first. And then the question which is usually asked on this is on the question that is usually asked on from this topic is on if I look into the syllabus, let me see the syllabus. They can ask you the question on Foucault's theory of power. Foucault's theory of power, usually they ask question on that. So Foucault's theory, we'll be discussing other theories also, but Foucault's theory will be discussing in some way. Let us try to understand the concept of power in political theory. All right. The power could be explained in several ways. When you talk about the idea of power, what usually we have in mind is our capability or our ability to influence the action or decision of others. When A is in a position to influence the action or decision of B. Try to understand the point. So power is about influence. Power is about influence that one exercises over the other person, or a group of person exercising influence over the other group, or person A exercising influence over B, all right, through different tactics, through different methods. You could be using soft power to influence somebody. You could be using hard power to influence somebody, or you could be using a mix of soft power and hard power to influence somebody, or you could be blatantly using force. You could be using blind force, in order to exercise influence. You could be using just hard power to exercise influence somebody. So, but when you talk about the idea of power, what is the primary thing in the idea of power is the influence that one exercises over the other. That is the point. All right. And power is the notion of power, the concept of power is the most powerful concept in the arena of political science, because politics is about the power. If politics is about the power, and international politics is about the international power, All right. So politics is about the power. Since politics, because see what happens in politics. If you talk about democracy, what do you do in democracy? What do you do? See, either you are trying to remain in power or you are trying to come back to power. You try to understand the point. See, in democracy, what happens? Either you try to remain in power or you are trying to come back to power. So power is a very, very influential concept. Power is the most challenging concept, most important notion, most important concept, particularly in political science. But the concept of power could be explained, could be considered in different ways. A population could be considered as a power. China is a great power because China has been able to convert its population into a resource. So China is a great power because of the people's resources. Population has been converted into a resource. China is a great power. You go to a house in China in the morning, at 9 o'clock, you will find that the house is not there. House has been converted into a different compartments. All right, and the people are assembling certain things. In every household is an industry. Every household is an industry in China. So what happens in that? Early in the morning at 9 o'clock, they would be creating a house would be converted to a small scale factory, or will be converted into a cottage industry, and you will find the people are producing something then. All right. The same house, you go to China, same house, if you go in the evening at 7 o'clock, you will find the children are playing there. And it just so compartments have been dismantled and the people are taking rest, the people are cooking food. So this is their strength. So population could also be used as a power as China is using. So population is also power. Again, natural resources. See why West Asia is a big power. What makes West Asia a big power? It's not the weapons that they have. It is the natural resource. It is the oil that they have. It is the oil that they have that has made Asia a great power. All right. And a country like India or other developing countries who are energy-starved countries, so we are dependent on them. They have nothing but oil. Oil, their natural resources has given a power to them. So natural resources could be a power. All right. Economic strength could also be a power. I'm just giving you an introduction of that. The power could be understood, power could be explained in different manner. Economic strength. Why do you want to make India a $5 trillion economy? Why we want to make India a $5 economy, $5 trillion economy? Why? Because that would signify the economic strength. When I say 20% of the purchasing, European Union has 20% of the purchasing power of the world. European Union has 20% of the purchasing power of the world. This is the economic strength. All right. So population could be a power, size of population could be a power, natural resources could be a power, economic strength, purchasing power of the people could be a power, military force could be a power, social stability could be a power. What makes India a strong what makes India a strong soft power is because of the social and political stability that we have, the social mobility that we have. There are very fair chance of people migrating from a lower class to the middle class or middle class to higher strata. So even a social stability or social mobility could also be considered as a power. So power could be explained in different manner. All right. So power is the concept of power is having a wider connotation. All right. Klein, C-L-I-N-E, Klein, a political scientist, Klein. Klein, while trying to explain and define the concept of power, he says power is nothing but ability to get the things done even against the will of somebody. So you want A wants B to be doing something which B doesn't want to do. So despite B's willingness, despite B's unwillingness, A gets a job done by the B despite B's willingness. So this could be called. So, and this he's able to do either by using force, okay, either by using force or by any other means. So you could even be using force to make the people do what they are not willing to do. That is what Klein says. And and this could also apply to the group. This could also apply to the group. Means the power enjoyed by the NATO, the kind of power which is enjoyed by the NATO. For example, despite Russia being against, despite Russia not wanting that NATO should be helping Ukraine, but NATO is helping Ukraine in different ways. So not bothering about Russia, so NATO is helping Ukraine. So the point is, when we talk about the concept of power, the primary thing in the concept of power, according to Klein, is that your ability to get things done despite the unwillingness of the other person. It could be a country, it could be a person, it could be a group. All right. Max Weber has talked about typology of power. Max Weber has talked about the typology of power. The first power that Max Weber talks about is coercive power. Now, coercive power means using force. Coercive power means use of force. Means people are forced to do something under the threat of force. People are forced to do something under some threat or under a threat of imprisonment, that if you do not do what we are saying, what we are telling you to do, you could be put behind the bar. So they are using a force, they are using a threat. So it should be called coercive power. What we are discussing Weber's typology of power. The first power that Max Weber talks about is power with the use of force, and he calls it coercive power. All right. The second typology of power, which Max Weber talks about, is he calls it a charismatic power. Means people obey certain people, people obey their leaders, all right, because of certain quality possessed by them. Means somebody is having a charismatic personality. Try to understand the point. Indira Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, Narendra Modi. So people are obeying the commands of the Prime Minister today, or people were obeying the commands of Indira Gandhi, right? Or people were obeying the commands of what you call is Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, because of the charismatic personality, because of the personal appeal that the leader had. So that kind of power is called charismatic power. So the first typology of power that Max Weber discusses is the coercive power, and the second power is the charismatic power. So there is when the leader, for an example, have certain qualities in them, right? See, people used to believe even Hitler. People used to believe follow even the Mussolini. To try to see the point. People were following Hitler. People were following Mussolini even for a certain period of time. All right. So, or the charisma that was there in Gandhi. So just on a call of Gandhi, entire country started supporting Mahatma Gandhi, and national movement became a mass movement just because of the call given by Mahatma Gandhi. So that would be called a charismatic power. All right. So we have talked about the coercive power. We have talked about the charismatic power. The third category of power that Max Weber talks about is the traditional power. The traditional power means when certain person, they are exercising their authority because of certain traditions, or because of certain traditions, or just in order to preserve a continuation, in order to preserve certain kind of continuation. Example I would like to give here is the authority of, or the values attached to the monarchy, values attached to the royal family. So the authority enjoyed by the monarchy in a country, or authority enjoyed by a monarchy in Britain, or the authority in one sense enjoyed by a kind of a traditional authority enjoyed by a monarchy even in Japan. So that would be called a traditional power. That would be called traditional power. So the power enjoyed by monarchy would be called a traditional power. All right. So coercive power, charismatic power, and traditional power. Then the other category of power, which has been described by Max Weber in his typology of power. He calls it a legal rational power. No, legal rational power means those who are enjoying the power, those who are exercising the authority over the others. It is just because they have a right. They have a right and they have a legal entitlement to do that. For example, if you talk about the bureaucratic power, if you talk about the power enjoyed by a judicial magistrate, if you talk about the power enjoyed by the commissioner of police, if you talk about the power enjoyed by a district magistrate or a judicial magistrate, so the power is assigned to them legally. So the power enjoyed by a district magistrate, or power enjoyed by a commissioner of police, or power enjoyed by a judicial magistrate is a legal rational power. So they have been authorized, they have been legally authorized to exercise the power. So there is a legal basis of their power. So that power would be called legal rational power. So we have a coercive power, we have a charismatic power, we have a traditional power or authority, and we have the legal rational power as explained by the Max Weber. All right. Then the other category of power that we can talk about is the legitimate power. Means, though there would be very little difference, but this is a subcategory, little difference between the legal rational power and the legitimate power. But when we talk about legitimate power, there's something important in it. It is power which is enjoyed by an individual due to the role, due to the status within the political system. So you can draw a parallel between legal rational power and the legitimate power. So the power enjoyed by an individual because of a particular role or status which he is enjoying in the organization. So this legitimate power sometimes is also explained as a positional power. So there would be a lot of overlapping when we discuss different categories of power. But just to make you understand, just to give you information about the wider connotation of the concept of power. All right. So power enjoyed by an individual just because of a particular role he has been assigned, or a status which he's enjoying in an organization. So this could also be explained as a positional power. Okay. And this kind of power involves formal delegation of authority to the position holder. So certain powers which have been delegated to you. All right. Certain powers which have been delegated to you. For example, cabinet minister. No, try to understand the cabinet minister. So the powers have been delegated to the cabinet minister when he is heading a particular ministry. So that kind of power would be called legitimate power. that kind of power would be called legitimate, because you enjoy would be called positional power or legitimate power. All right. Then there is another subcategory of power. We call it a referent power. See, I'm just trying to give you information about the concept of power, how in what manner the concept of power can be used. But they will not ask you a question on the concept of power. The question that they will ask you on the theory of power. But just in order to have a wider understanding, just in order to have a broader understanding about the concept of power, I'm using the different terms here. All right. So there is also a term which is called a referent power. REFE. Now, referent power is between a referent power and the charismatic power. Why? Just let me tell you. This referent power comes out of the ability of an individual to attract others. You try to understand. And in charismatic power also, a charismatic leader is able to attract the people. And same thing happens in the of the ability of an individual to attract others, and people get fascinated. The other term that we can use, that when you get fascinated with a particular kind of individual, interpersonal skill of a person, based on the walking style of a person, based on the oratorial style of a person. So you get fascinated, you get attracted towards a person. An individual is able to attract you because of the specific kind of mannerism that he has, because of a particular oratorial skill that he has, because of particular kind of style that he's had. So a specific kind of mannerism, a walking style, the speech, the oratorial skill. So, for example, many of us get fascinated by. Right. So the way he walks. So you and this could be happen with anyone. So you could be get fascinated by a political leader. You could be getting fascinated by an actor. So this kind of power, which individual enjoys because he's able to attract, that kind of power is called referent power. So you can draw a parallel between a referent power and charismatic power. Now, the other category of time is already up. I'm sorry, I'm extremely sorry. I do not look in the watch. I'm extremely sorry. So we'll continue our discussion tomorrow, and we'll spend about another 20 minutes on the concept of power, and then we'll switch over to the theory of power. So thank you everyone for all your patience. Thank you.